You're watching Car Nitty. My name's Mizan, and today I'm here reviewing a Mark IV R32 against my Mark V R32. And I want to give a nice warm welcome to Alex. Alex, thank you for coming down. I really appreciate it. So, funny thing, I put a poll up on my Instagram saying, who knows someone with a Mark V R32? Someone called Adrian Pun recommended you to me. Got in touch with you, and here we are. And you have to admit, the sight of our cars together, it's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
It is a good thing.
It is a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
Two deep pearl blue R32s. And for me, honestly, this is where they started. I mean, the Mark IV was the first, and then the Mark V was the follow-up. And for me, that's what our R is about. It's not about the 6, 7, 8. If you're a fan of your modern day Mark 7Rs, Mark 8Rs, you have to respect both these cars, and this one in particular, because this is the car that started it all. This is the first ever Golf to wear an R badge up front. This is the Mark IV R32, and this car was only in production for just 2 years, from 2003 to 2004. That's it. That's why these cars are so rare, because so late in the Mark IV's life, VW engineers decided, let's stuck a 3.2 litre VR6 up front and let's make it an R32. And it was a success. People loved these cars, and that's why when it came to the next generation, this car had a much longer life. This ran from 2005 to 2009 in some cases. And this is why the R32 is such a special car, because this is where it started. These are the only two cars to have that 3.2 up front. They're the ones that started it all. But let's be honest, they're forgotten about, aren't they? When I say to you a Golf and the letter R associated with it, you're gonna think of a Mark 7 or 7.5. But you guys cannot forget what these cars have done for the brand. These cars only came in a manual. Only came in a manual. So this is the thing with the Mark V, you have the choice of getting a DSG on a manual. And let's be honest here, a lot of people do opt for the DSG, isn't it?
Well, I think it's just, at the time it was seen as a kind of luxury Golf.
It is.
So people just wanted it as a daily to put around it.
And not just that, right? When you think about what a DSG is, it's a dual clutch gearbox in a car. It's a crazy feat of engineering, especially at that time.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I don't blame people for wanting it. But now that the cars are getting older and older, I think we've come now to a point where you would want the manual, and that's how I feel.
Circle.
Let's talk about performance. Now, both these cars feature a 3.2 litre naturally aspirated VR6. Now, V is obviously the design of the engine, but what does the R stand for? It stands for the word Rye, which in German means inline. So these are a V inline 6. Now, you might be wondering, V6 is usually its own engine and a straight 6 is its own engine. Now, the reason why they're VR engines is because you cannot fit a traditional V6 or straight 6 in either of these cars, because the engine has to be transversely mounted. Now, in terms of power, they're very, very close, yet somehow it's not a massive gain. Now, the R32 Mark V is 247 brake horsepower and 320 newtons of torque. The Mark IV, can you believe, is just 10 horsepower shy. It's got about 237 brake horsepower, and it's got the exact same newtons of torque. So, not a massive gain if you think about moving to a newer generation car. One big change is the transmission options. So the Mark IV can only be had with a manual gearbox. The reason for that is, back then there were no suitable gearboxes that are automatic to be had in a high performance car like an R32. Your traditional torque converter gearbox isn't going to be well equipped to handle that power plant. So it was only manual, and it came with a 6-speed. Mark V can be had with that manual gearbox, or you can have a DSG, which is a direct shift gearbox. That was revolutionary at the time, because it's a dual clutch gearbox, and what that means is, finally, a gearbox is worthy of being paired to a high performance car in the VAG lineup. They both feature the same Haldex 4-wheel drive system, which is predominantly front wheel drive, and apart from that, they're pretty similar cars. Everything's so familiar yet so different. And what do I mean by that? The first things I want to say is, you can tell there's splashes of just absolute beauty in this cabin. Sitting in the Mark IV is such a crazy experience compared to the Mark V. Now, this car did come out in the late 90s, as in the chassis, the Mark IV. So when you're sitting in it, you can really feel it's such an old car. Now, there are things that the R32 has which makes it nice. You've got the R logo on the steering wheel, you have this chrome trim in certain places, and you have these lovely seats. which are obviously are standard on all Mark IV R32s, and you have the floor mats and the dials. That's it. There's not a lot going on here, but that's the charm of the Mark IV. And one thing about a Golf, as you guys should know, is
if you listen carefully, it sounds just like a Golf.
jumping in the Mark V is a crazy experience. You wouldn't believe I've jumped into a car that's just a few years newer than that. It's honestly a massive step up, massive. And I think this is probably the biggest jump that the automotive industry had in general. Going from 90s to 2000s has to be the biggest. Now, there are some nice touches in this car as well. Silver carbon weave, so this time it's got the carbon weave. R logo on the steering wheel. You get the amazing dials. Then the pedals also have the R logo on it. The Mark IV has the same as well. And the seats have the R logo embossed as well. These aren't the wing backs, but they're still very nice seats and they're very, very comfortable. But that's it. You don't get a lot to tell you, so it's not very shouty, but it's enough for you to know that you're sitting in a very special car. And then the seats are just amazing. Are these Recaros? Koenigs, okay. Yeah. And they were standard on all Mark IVs.
Yeah, all of them came with this. The only difference or option that you could get was cloth insert in the middle.
Cloth insert.
But they're all heated, all the same seats.
That's pretty cool, because in the Mark V, we get the Recaro wingbacks as an option. Otherwise, you get the standard leather seats or cloth seats, which do look decent, but you're getting the wingbacks in a Mark IV regardless.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a cool option. And yeah, it's just such an analog experience in this car. Honestly, it's so analog. Even though this car is I'd class it as an early 2000s car, it feels 90s. Because it came out in what, 97, 98, the Mark IV?
Yeah, they started making them late 90s, yeah.
Yeah, 98 I think, some 97 potentially, but 98 definitely. This engine is an old engine. It's a dinosaur. It shouldn't be around. And the Mark V is almost a bit of a new chassis to have that engine. Do you agree?
Yeah, and I think
it feels more.
When VW kind of realised that, and they thought, you know, Mark VI is coming up, let's put something more modern in it.
Yeah.
Obviously, turbo technology came out.
Yep.
And I think they kind of just went that route because, you know, no one really wants a big, heavy engine.
I know, it's such a shame. There's not enough people like me and you out there. That's not the truth.
I think that's what it is.
And I think obviously the Mark VI was a bit of a hate factor. It kind of took the brunt of the hate, and the Mark 7's just embraced it and done a really good job at that. And people love the Mark 7s, don't they? They're very common cars.
Yeah. I mean, I think partly to do with this is obviously just back in, you know, when the Mark 7s came out, everyone their mum had one because they just had good lease deals.
Yeah, they did. They were giving them away at one point. Exactly. They were giving them away.
You'll see like 60-year-olds in them because, you know, they were just upsold by a dealer.
Because back then when this and the Mark V were around, there was no finance.
No.
So you had to have, what, 30 grand?
To buy one of these, you have to really want one.
You have to really want one.
Otherwise you just opt for, you know, a standard one or a GTI or something.
Yeah, because and the GTIs were more common in the Mark IV because that's what that was the hot version of a Golf. It was the GTI, it was not the R. This is the first R. This is where they came out and said, no, there's something above the GTI.
Yeah. So
it's just, for me, it's just crazy how this car is. And honestly, I love the way this car feels, even when you're just pottering around town. I feel like the steering's a bit more heavier, that clutch is heavy, it feels like I'm driving a BMW. It's such an amazing experience. And you've got me thinking, what's a manual Mark V like now? That feels so nice that I am the one that made that happen. Because yes, in my car, that feels so. The thing is, you can have manual mode in a TSG, you can have the flappy paddles, you can put it into the side and pretend you're driving a sequential even.
Yeah,
but it's not the same.
It's not the same.
It's not the same. To do that with my left hand, you can't make that emotion up. I'm buying a manual R32 then, by the looks of it.
Well, have I convinced you?
I think you have. Look, it's not the same in the auto. It's just not. And I think the clear thing is the R32 is not a very fast car. 250 brake horsepower, 320 for modern day standards, they're not fast cars. So they're already 4-wheel drive. They're quite nose heavy because of the heavy engine up front. then you get the DSG, which adds weight, but it takes a lot of the fun out of it. This car is more alive because of the gearbox.
Yeah.
Look, it's shifting between 2 and 3. There's a Porsche up ahead, right, above this C-Class. And I know I'm having more fun than him. I know it because he's probably a PDK. That's just... I don't know how to put it into words. You have to... I don't know whether because I'm a VR6 man, I feel the emotion that I'm feeling, or this is just as good as it is.
I think this is about as good as it gets, to be honest. I think the manual gearbox is an essential part of the recipe for an R32. Otherwise, I feel like you can get bored quite easily.
The Howdex feels very identical. It doesn't feel much different. Sounds so good. And because I'm used to the DSG, I'm so used to just it shifting by itself or me flicking a paddle, but it's all me.
It's much more rewarding experience.
It doesn't feel like a VW.
No.
It doesn't feel like a VW. Insane. The way I describe a Mark 5 R32, my one, is it sounds amazing. That's all I can say. That's all I can say. Because that's all it's good for. This, it's engaging at least. Right, we're now in the Mark 5. Alex is behind the wheel. Alex, what's your thoughts so far?
First impressions, I think just a lot more refined, a lot more modern feeling.
Yeah, I feel like I'm sitting in a Phaeton right now, isn't it?
Yeah, compared to the Mark 4, it's just, you know, like a luxury car.
The leather seats are so much more comfortable. They're like sofas, isn't it?
Yeah,
you can feel yourself.
Like you're sitting in an armchair kind of thing.
I feel like I'm sitting in an armchair right now. We've actually got an armrest. Your car doesn't even have one. And there's so much more creature comforts, isn't it? And the interior is so much more modern. It doesn't feel like one generation up, does it?
No, it feels like, you know, 2 or 3.
The thing about the Mark 5 is the Mark 5 will always be that legendary car, because the Mark 3 and the Mark 4 were very disappointing cars for the VW. They were very disliked, specifically the GTIs. But in general, the quality of the Mark 4 and the Mark 3 was not there for the mass market. So with the Mark 5, they did put a lot into product development to make it a great car. This is a huge jump. I didn't really, at the time I didn't think it was that such a big deal. It is, isn't it?
When you go from one to the other, the contrast is.
But if you were to go from a Mark 1 Focus to a Mark 2 Focus, I'm telling you, it would not feel this big. Because they're all competitors. This is a compared to the Mark 2 Focus. And the Mark 1 is a compared to the Mark 4 Golf.
Yeah.
Because I've had a Mark 2 ST and it didn't feel high quality. And I know a Mark 1 will probably feel just a little bit more worse off than, not much more worse off. This feels a lot more of an upgrade over the Mark 4's interior. But that's how it is as a car. In terms of it being an R32, how does it feel? You've still got nice dials, obviously.
Yeah, obviously there's still elements of it being an R32, obviously, especially the colour.
Yep.
Obviously you still get the engine note.
Yep.
And obviously the R badge on here as well. But
how's the steering feel?
A lot lighter. A lot lighter. More kind of, I guess just
synthetic.
Less connected. I think is probably the right word for it.
And how does your left leg twitching because you're not having to do it?
Yeah, well, I mean, when we first got in the car and I tried to start it, I was, reaching for the gear stick to make sure it's in neutral. So it's a very different experience. But
the Mark 5 is a better daily driver. I think we've established that. So if you're planning to do mileage on your R32, regardless of Mark 4 or 5, the Mark 5 is the better car.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you go,
it is just a mile muncher, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you can sit happy on the motorway, 70 or 80.
Yep.
It won't. It's not going to complain about it.
Nope.
Like, you're just going to sit there in comfort.
Yep.
And that's kind of it, isn't it?
100%.
Mark 4 is kind of a bit more of a raw feel. It's a weekend car, isn't it?
It is.
Something you shove in the garage and you go into your diesel Audi to drive every day.
And it just has more character because of the oldness of it. But would you go for a DSG or a manual then in a Mark 5 then? Do you think the DSG just suits this setup that we've just spoken about, or do you think that manual will give that Mark 4 element, or do you think no? You know what?
I think it kind of depends what you're looking for. I think probably DSG, only because if you buy a Mark 5, I feel like you're kind of going in with the mindset of you are going to drive it, more fairly regularly, and you're kind of wanting that daily aspect.
Yeah.
And I think a DSG kind of suits that. Whereas if you buy a Mark 4, you're not going to daily drive that thing.
Yeah.
Maybe in summer for a couple of months, but it's going to sit in the garage most of the time because it is just a weekend car. And I think when you're buying one of these, you kind of it's a Mark 5. I think you kind of you want it to be your daily.
I agree. And you know what? You can't fault the DSG. Yes, it robs you of that manual element, but you can't fault it. It's a very good gearbox. There's a reason why people got these.
Very advanced for its age.
Very, very advanced. You like it?
Yeah, that's nice. I like it. That is a lot more than I thought it would be, to be honest.
But it's not Asbo, is it?
No, it's enough, isn't it? Like,
it's enough. Because when I was driving your Mark 4, when I looked after gas, I was a bit like, what's happening? Why is it quiet? What is that it? Oh, let me put my foot down again. And you're just constantly on the gas. But this one, you can let your foot off the gas, and you're like, you know what? I don't mind listening to some of that.
Yeah, no, I quite like that. I wish I had that on my Mark 5, to be honest.
That's what I'm saying. And it all depends on what rev range. So they're only kicking after 3,000 RPM.
Oh, okay.
And the more higher you let off, then the more aggressive the crackles are. Right. So 3,000, it'll be little minor pops and crackles. So you have not hit it yet. That's why it's not doing it.
It just makes you smile.
It does. And this is the original exhaust, by the way, just the rest of me.
Really?
Yes. That sounds amazing, doesn't it?
Yeah, that is incredible. I didn't think, because obviously, on my one it was sports cats.
Yeah.
And then Miltech non-res, so effectively the same setup as my Mark 4.
The Miltech gives that, I know it gives that gargling noise. This doesn't. This has such an open noise, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, that is proper strange.
It is. I've basically been there, done that with the Mark 5, so I know the platform so well, and I know how to do it up. So how does the flappy paddle element of the DSG feel? It's not as involving. You're still doing something.
It's not as involving, but obviously, you still get the sense of being a performance car, because obviously, like, I know it's not even comparable, but modern, like, supercars, that kind of thing, all of them have
automatics.
Yeah, all of them have like flappy pedals and that kind of thing, and there is that kind of sport element to it. Obviously, like you say, not as involving.
Yeah.
But at least it feels like you're doing something. Like 100%. It's not a complete like auto, which I think would be a lot worse. But
yeah, that's what I'm saying. At least you have the manual element, and this gearbox is lightning quick with the shifts, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can feel it. By the time in your Mark 4 with your clutch is a bit clunky, isn't it? Because it's quite heavy, and it doesn't like you gassing at the same time.
No.
It doesn't like it, so
it's quite aggressive.
It's quite aggressive, so it's one of those things you have to let off so slowly, and then you can plant the gas. If there's any element of the clutch still being engaged, your car doesn't like it. So with the DSG, it's almost rapid, isn't it?
Yeah, it is very kind of point and shoot, very like modern feeling.
But with the old school lump.
Yeah, which some would argue is probably the best combination.
It is. How does the Howlix feel?
Like you said, I think very similar.
Very similar. I don't think they've tweaked it much over the years, have they?
Well, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't change it. Like, that's kind of
it's true.
Like,
Does this feel more nose heavy?
I think just as a car it feels a bit heavier.
It's the gearbox then, because that's the only difference between us, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I'm
kind of just has more weight to it.
Yeah, it's the gearbox. It's got to be the gearbox, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking in my head, I think the Mark 4 weighs more than the Mark 5, because the more of the Mark 4 is made out of metal, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so,
you could wrap the car around the tree. You've broken the tree. Car's still fine. But I don't think it will be that much, because yes, the gearbox adds it here, but I think your one is the weight of your car probably adds it.
Yeah, so they're probably about on par, I think.
Yeah. You want to do the crack 'em up on yours, isn't it?
Yeah, to be honest.
Because I think it saves you fuel in some ways, because you let your foot off every now and then. Don't lose any time on the shifts. Whereas with the manual, you're like, and you're like, wait, I can't be too harsh on the clutch. And then you're like, oh, now I can. It's a faster car. That's the thing. If you get the Dish G, you are the faster car. For a car that's not that fast, you're the faster car.
Yeah.
So there's so many variables at play, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's not as simple as it's that or this, is there?
No, it's completely different.
I thought coming into this, both cars would feel near identical, and the only talking subject would be the preference of 90s or noughties styling. But rather, I've unraveled something quite big here. The Mark 4 is an analog experience that feels like a time machine taking you back to a proper old school car with minimal driving aids. The Mark 5 also feels like a time machine, but rather it feels like it's taking you into the future, yet holding onto that dinosaur of an engine, which is a juxtaposition. I don't think you can go wrong with either car if you're after an R32. It all comes down to intended use and purpose. If you want a VR6 you can daily drive despite the horrible fuel bill, comfort, class and refinement, the Mark 5 is the car for you. The last car to feature that glorious engine. If you want to store a special Golf under a car cover or a garage and drive it on the weekends or summer months, the Mark 4 is definitely the one. Both gearboxes are amazing and I can't fault either one, so it all comes down to which suits your needs and driving style. It's worth noting the Mark 4 is a safer nest egg in terms of investment, but no doubt if you look after your Mark 5, they too will climb in value in the coming years. So if you're looking to buy an R badged Golf, just make sure it's a 32 and no doubt you'll enjoy the experience.